Welcome back to the Picture This podcast. Today's guest is an acclaimed children's illustrator and author whose work has garnered multiple awards, including the coveted Sakura Medal and an outstanding achievement in social emotional literature. Known for his enchanting storytelling and whimsical illustrations, his standout achievements include these star-reviewed titles. Anzu, the Great Kaiju, which, I mean, how can you not love a book about giant monsters? And Imagine You and Me. With a unique blend of creativity and charm, he captivates young audiences, inspires a love for reading and art. It's my great pleasure to introduce the illustrator of my book, Sloth Went, and maybe a frame or two of some Disney flick, Benson Shum.
Hey, Adam. Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm so grateful for that introduction.
Yeah, I wanted to come up with something that would make you feel warm and good, and I got a good laugh with the Sakura Medal, but like those things, because that's that award, a youth voting award, which is for those that don't know, it's a Japanese.
That's right. Yeah, it's like all the international schools in Japan all vote on a book, and they had some wonderful nominees as well. So yeah, it's pretty cool to be part of it. So.
I love when the kids can all get together and pick something, especially, like the March Madness things that some librarians do. Anytime that you can get the kids to get behind a book and support it, and an author, especially when it's about an author or an illustrator, and their work, and you can really bring in some things outside of that one single book and say, here's the group of things that this person has done. It can be a really cool process for something to do in the school.
Yeah, totally.
So we were brought together because of Sloth taking a dump, and and as part of that book, you did a lot of research, and I know that you do a lot of research for everything that you do, especially some of your more ethnic stories where you really want to get things right. Can you talk a little bit about that and how you tie that into, when you talk about your stories?
Yeah. Like I said, for example, let's go with our book, Sloth Went, that we did together. I didn't know a whole lot about sloths. Like, I know what they look like. They're just adorable. But kind of finding out, like, when I was kind of getting into the book, I was also thinking about, aside from the character, like the wonderful character you wrote, I also want to make the environment that they live in also believable. So, going to where sloth came from or comes from, and what settings do they live in, like what tree do they live in, trees, like, and what kind of trees, what kind of leaves, what do they eat, all that kind of stuff. I try to be as accurate as possible. And I do the same thing with my books that are more cultural based as well. Whether that's something from a personal that I grew up with, or things that I'm not too familiar with, then I'll again do my research kind of thing, or even ask people. So that's kind of how I kind of first dive into it, whether that's a manuscript or something that I start on my own.
So it really does, for something like Sloth, it bridges into some STEM things, it bridges into some maybe some anthropological things. So there's a lot of different lessons that educators can get just by looking at some of your stories. And more than that, even, it can be fun for students to try to find something that maybe isn't right, or find some, do their own research and say, okay, what do sloths really eat? Did he get this thing right? Are those flowers something that they eat, or something that they don't eat? I know we talked a lot about that part, especially Sloth's mom, and kind of how to set her apart, which I think resonates really well. So when you do write your own stories that you also illustrate, how do you talk about those stories in terms of this research that you do?
I think when I come with a story, I guess in the classroom setting, you go and always ask, like, what if, let's say if you're trying to create a story. So for the Anzu series, I started off with an idea where I love kaijus, like it's a Japanese term for giant monsters like Godzilla. And, if you bring that up in the classroom, you can talk about, okay, well, what are Godzilla, like what are kaijus, right? And then what is their characteristics? I'm always asking myself and my characters, what if, or how, and what, and where, like where do they come from, and why they are the way they are. and ask like how did they get so big? Maybe that could spark another idea. So I think questioning the character and also questioning whether it's the illustrations like why did the author or the illustrator choose those words or choose to draw that, because everything is done for or chosen for a reason or drawn for a reason. So I think that's a great topic to kind of go off of on top of the story that you're reading.
And it really is a choice, because I've always a big fan of the kaiju myself, and more Gamora, Mothra a little bit, but Godzilla always won. And I like the ones where it was sometimes they had to battle and strive a little bit. Yeah. And I really do like some of the stories that they have coming out now where they're actually working together, and it's more, a team effort in some things, even if the team is Godzilla and a giant ape. But that choice to make your main character Anzu sort of a cuter version of Godzilla or Gojira, when you decided that was what you were going to do, did you do that because it's recognizable, or did you do that to use part of the character? Because that character of Godzilla is very well defined in the cinematic universe.
Yeah, so I think first, same as you, I love Godzilla. I love the whole mythology of the monsters and all that kind of stuff. And where even I don't know, when I was young, I watched Power Rangers a lot. It was just like these big giant, whether they're mecha Godzilla or mecha robots, and everyone's like down here. There are people that destroying the cities. So I always loved that fantastical idea of the big and the small. But then I thought, well, I tried to get into the character's head, and I wanted to twist on his head that do they like destroying things? Is that what they're been told to do, or is it something they just do naturally? And if the case on both sides, like why? And I kind of explored that. And what if the character doesn't want to destroy, right? What if they were told to, but this doesn't feel like how they would want to I don't know, survive or live, kind of thing, right? And then what happens to that? Like what happens if they defy what the society tells you that you're Godzilla, you should be destroying your cities, right? And I feel like a lot of, whether you're a student or teacher or an adult, you can relate to something that may not feel right, but it's what everyone around you is doing, and kind of flipping it on its head. And the consequences of that too, right? At one point in the story, I thought about the perspective from the family, right? Would the family be ashamed of their Godzilla or their son that is like, what would my other constituents around me think of my kid, kind of thing, right? And thought of it in their perspective. And then, and then the little guys, the little villagers, I thought about their perspective. Like, do they, are they always scared of these Godzillas that come into the city, or do they embrace them? So I was thinking of different perspectives. So in the classroom, you can actually look at and pick which perspective you want to write from, and how are they feeling based on what the story, like the story that we have, right? And it can go in many different directions. And that way you can also, I think we also kind of learn a bit about empathy, also about how we navigate depending on different perspectives.
Yeah, and you really got into navigating that in the second book, where it's really tied into that SEL message, which is fantastic. And the first book I got for my godchildren, so I have twin half Japanese godchildren. What is better, what is a better book to get than, Anzu the Great Kaiju, because it really ties into, and their dad is totally into all of the, Gilla movies. And he's got them on VHS, black and white VHS. So yeah, so it was a great gift.
Thank you.
So definitely. And I really do like the idea of going into the classroom and saying, we read this story and there's all different characters in this story. Write your own, or create your own story from the viewpoint of somebody, or, pick an illustration and take that character and write their story and how they react to these events. And it might be completely different. than the way
Right.
the story is going, which is a really fun and creative way to reinterpret the stories.
Right. So it's almost kind of like a you choose your own adventure, right? Because
Yeah.
you can write in the character's voice and what's happening, the dialogue around them, but what are they feeling at that moment? Because the illustration also tells you another story on top of what the text is saying as well. So you can almost read into what are they feeling? What is that expression? You know, what could that say?
So I want to get into Alex's good fortune a little bit. That's really for me, that was my first introduction to your cultural writing, where you're writing these cultural stories. If I remember, that was a Dolly Parton selection, right? Did I?
Yes. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, congrats on that.
Thank you.
For those who don't know, Dolly Parton has an imagination library,
Mhm.
and she gives tons and tons of free books out. So it's very worthwhile, and it's a very cool thing when you get your book listed there. So where did this book come from for you, and how would we think about that again in terms of bringing it into the classroom and finding ways to use this to teach outsiders, people unfamiliar with traditions, different traditions, kind of how to accept them or at least be intrigued enough to learn about them.
Yeah. So that story kind of came about. Actually, I was talking with my sisters about it, just about the idea of the traditions that we grew up with, and now that they're getting a little older, I'm seeing my sisters kind of um, partake in traditions that we grew up with, but also they're learning their own and doing their own traditions as well. And I wanted to kind of write kind of in some ways like not preserve is not the right word, but kind of like remember what we did as a kid and then kind of write that all down and then for my nieces and nephews to kind of say, hey, this is what me and your parents and your mom or dad have done growing up. And then what can you add to the tradition? What would you like to carry on kind of thing? Because the Lunar New Year is pretty big and a lot of people have different traditions. And for this story, it was the stuff that I grew up with that my parents passed on to us and what we would like to pass on to our nieces and nephews or our kids. But it also kind of opens it hopefully to students and stuff like that about, well, I never experienced something like this. Maybe it's something we can try next year or try this year. And in the classroom, I also created like a activity guide on our website. It's all free to download, but like for Alex's good fortune specifically, I made like a dumpling recipe or even like a Lunar New Year banner making, which is kind of fun, like a lucky banner thing where I have all the zodiacs kind of animals printable and step by step how do you make a banner that you can string in the classroom. And a lot of classrooms have done that because then they start to think about, well, what year of the animal am I? And then what does that mean? So in the book, it shows you characteristics of every zodiac. And it's kind of fun. It's kind of like, Valentine's Day where you're like, oh, what did you have? And you're going to learn about a little bit about that. And, does it match your personality? If it doesn't, that's fine. Kind of like it kind of opens up and maybe another world that they haven't experienced yet, and that's something that they can always revisit every year. And it's kind of a fun game to kind of guess, each other's zodiacs and stuff like that.
What is your zodiac is kind of a fun
Yeah.
thing. And I do like that sharing of your, whether it's a cultural tradition or a familial tradition. More and more I'm finding that my friends or as our kids are getting to an age where they're starting to have families, it isn't necessarily as much about the culture, but this is what my family did. And it may be based in a cultural tradition, but it's being interpreted now as this is what my family did. And I like the idea of that sharing that you can do in school as a lesson plan. So, in your book, Alex shares with the little boy her kind of story, and they kind of go through it together. And it could be an interesting activity to say, what is something that you and your family do, and how would you explain that to somebody else? And write a little story about how you could do that, and that becomes an activity where they can share, and then you can put the whole thing together as like, this is our classroom culture now, and have kind of a good compendium of it.
Yeah, definitely. And like I said, I love the idea where you are sharing something that or how do you introduce something to someone that may not be familiar with it, right? So yeah, that's a good idea.
I love it. And I will, as always, I will link to Benson's website for all of his free resources so that everybody can get those. And then, of course, everything that we talk about here, I'm going to turn into resources that you'll be able to get below or at my website. And you can get there by going to adaml.rocks. How great is that? I got a real short URL and it's adaml.rocks. I think it's hilarious. You know, if you're not having fun, right?
Right. Well, I want to add also with the teachers' resources as well. For Alex, now for Anzu the Great Kaiju and Anzu the Great Listener, I also have teachers' guides or resources created to go with each book. It's created from a friend of mine named Marcy Colley, who's another author. And so she was an educator before. So she created these guides that are great for discussions as well.
So you live near Marcy, right?
Not too far, yeah, about 3 hours drive. Yeah, she's down in San Diego.
My hair twin, Marcy. We've got, I mean, at least the curly part. This is the second time that Marcy's been talked about on my podcast.
Oh,
so,
really?
Yeah, I'm gonna have to reach out to her and see if she wants to be a part of it. I haven't seen her since she moved west, so you know we used to see each other around on the East Coast stuff a little bit.
Yeah.
So yeah, we met in an elevator, and the first thing she did was she goes, "Hair twin." I mean, you know how calm and reserved Marcy. But yeah, we were talking. I was talking about Cat Ninja. It's called the Cat Ninja, the series that she does.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we were talking about that the other day. Matthew Winter. You familiar with Matthew?
Yes.
Yeah. So I talked to him a couple of weeks ago, and yeah, we were talking about those stories. So just great conversation. And I love Marcy. So please do. Tell her I'm going to be reaching out. Tell her how much fun this podcast is. And that's so fun. She's next.
Yes.
So for those that don't know, Benson does work for a small company out west called Disney. And Disney has, at least, you know, in all the online forums, they have a certain way of creating stories, right? So there's like the Pixar method and the Disney method, and you know all these different things. Do you use the Disney method when you're creating your own stories? Do you follow those same paths for elevating and the twists and the turns, or do you find yourself, you know, going in Benson's direction?
That's a great question because I don't know all the Disney and Pixar ways really. I actually read a lot of books about writing in general, so I actually don't know the Disney and Pixar way. But what I do take from my experience in animation is character. So a lot of my books are usually character based. So I'm an animator at the studio, so I really try to think about where their characters come from and how are they feeling at this moment, at this time in this scene. Because there's usually about like 80 to 100 animators on a show, so you do only animate a very small part. So the shots that we do get, we really do think about when they're acting, how are they feeling in this moment, right? And then we pull back and think about the picture of the whole, the journey that they go through. So I try to use that when I'm writing. And that's kind of usually how I find my characters in the early stages.
Awesome. So just so you know, there is like a specific kind of, you know, thing.
Formula?
It's let me see if I can remember what it is. It's every day, right? So every day something happens until this happens. Because that happens, this happens. Because that happens, this happens. So it's kind of a formula.
Familiar.
Yeah,
that does sound familiar now. Yeah, I've used it before. Maybe I should try.
Yeah, so it's a lot of fun to play around with. More than that, it's a great activity for using in the classroom and for kids to learn, because it's very, very simple to do. And I have templates for it on my website where it's fill in the blank. So you can use it with first graders, you can use it assisted with kindergartners, and you can use it with high school students, because, you know, it's scalable.
Yeah.
And it really does simplify everything. It simplifies everything we do down to a simple formula. But inside of that, there's a lot of differences and changes that you can make, which is kind of cool.
And I think it's also great, like you said, that it could be a group activity or it could be a solo activity, because sometimes, everyone has such a different imagination and it can go in any direction, which is really fun, you know? So yeah, that's a really fun activity.
So the most recent book is We Are Lion Dancers. And I have not yet had a chance to read this one, but I have been told that I'm missing out. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got to this specific story, and really how you like? So when I was talking about this with the person who was like, "How have you not read it yet?" They were talking about your characters that you picked to focus this story around. Can you talk a little bit about them and kind of how you molded the story around them?
Yeah. So We Are Lion Dancers kind of came up because so Alex's Good Fortune was the first book, and then I wanted to write more about other traditions, right? So the second one was Mooncake Means Family, so it's about the Mid Autumn Festival, and then We Are Lion Dancers was the third book, and that one was because it's like not necessarily traditions, has a bit of traditions, but a lot of it is also about the culture of the lion dance, right? We see it all the time at the Lunar New Year, and it happens at many events like weddings, business openings, and I really wanted to write about that just because I grew up in a line dance club, in a kung fu club. I was one of the dancers. So there's in the line dance, there's two: the front person that does the head, and another one that does the body. So I was always the body part. So I always have to like bend down, but and I have to lift the person in front so that the line dance is higher. But so I was kind of writing from experience of what it's like to be part of a team, right? And how to navigate the actual mechanics of it as well. That if someone that haven't done it before may not know those little things, so I think adding that makes it more specific, and also we can all learn a little bit about behind the scenes of what goes into a line dance. But the core of it is really about like communications and teamwork and just being together to celebrate something, And I think I do value a lot of my time when I was part of a team, because there's just something about where you have each other's back when you are performing, or because you're going through the same emotions of the anxiety of getting ready to perform in front of like hundreds of people that you've never met before. And what if you make a mistake, and all those little feelings and stuff like that. I feel like in the classroom, it's a great discussion, right? Like, some people are very brave and they can just raise their hand and ask a question, but some people might be a bit reserved, and then we want to open space for those as well. So I feel like when I was writing the book, I was kind of thinking about that and about teamwork.
And it really is something that you can bring into the classroom, like that kind of teamwork. And really, it is an easy thing. Bring in a blanket. Bring in a blanket, and you can have a lion dance team in the classroom. You don't really have to do a whole lot more than that, but you can. And you can make a cool mask for the person in the front. You can do all kinds of things to spice it up, but it does become an exercise in teamwork and what you can do together. That's more than what you can do by yourself.
And also the line dance has a lot of rhythms that you can be in music class or any classroom where there's a certain beat to it. And I think that's a really fun thing to do in the classroom as well. Like, how is the rhythm of the line dance drums compared to, let's say, a rock band kind of thing, right? And you can sort of count them out. And I think that could be a really fun exercise as well.
Yeah, very, very cool. I love that. I definitely have to get that book. So I have a couple of standard segments that we do every episode. And the first one is Adam's Book Bag. And this is where you get to recommend a picture book. It can be yours, it can be somebody else's, and explain kind of how you talk about it. So it's a book that you find yourself going to use as an explanation, right? So For me, there's a couple that I go to all the time. One is Chloe and the Lion, right? So when I talk about working with illustrators, like, well, I always feel like the illustrator wants to feed me to the lion, right? And if you're not familiar with this book, it's wonderful. It's an author and an illustrator trying to work together to create something, and all kinds of horrible things happen, and it's really really wonderful. But it's kind of a go-to book for me. So what is a go-to book for you that you use when you're trying to illustrate a concept or an idea?
Yeah. Actually, who is the author and illustrator of that?
Chloe and the Lion is Mac Barnett and Adam Rex.
Your author's an illustrator. That's great.
Well, his name's Adam, so we there's like I don't know how it is with all the Bensons in children's literature, but all the Adams know each other.
All the Adams are prolific. That I know.
We all know each other. There's like an insular group. We've got a secret Adam text chain.
The book that I go back to is called The Book of Mistakes, and it's written and illustrated by Corinna Luyken. When I read that book, I just bought it at the library. I didn't know much about it. I just saw the cover and said, oh, this is interesting. And when I read it, it has very, very few words, but it says so much. For me, for that book, I go back to it because there's a lot, books that they didn't want lessons, but for me, it isn't a lesson of how you view things. So what the book is about is it starts off with a drawing that the reader, the character is drawing on the page. And as you flip the page, you add stuff to it, right? And at one point, there was a mistake that was made, but they kept going, and it ballooned into something beautiful, like a mural of amazing art. And it goes to show that there are no mistakes really, because all these mistakes can add up to something beautiful, and to just kind of keep going. Because I know, at least for me, as when I'm illustrating or doing anything creative, usually you start off very excited, and then you get to a point where you're like, oh no, I ruined it, or this is not looking good, I should just stop. But to push forward with it, and eventually you see that learning from those mistakes, or even embracing those mistakes, actually you created something very unique. For me, for an example, would be like, I was doing this painting that I spent hours on, and I was reaching over for some water to dip my brush. I had knocked a paint bottle, and it spilled on half of my painting that I did. And it was not like, it was like black. So it was like a dark color. And I was like, man, what did I do? And so then I decided to use that color, whether it was black or whatever color it is, into my painting. And actually, it is one of my favorite ones because there was just something about it that I would never have thought to do if I did not accidentally knock over this bottle of paint. So it comes with little surprises kind of thing, just kind of push forward with it. So that's kind of a book that I tend to I like to go back to. So, and plus Corinna is such a wonderful person. I don't know if you ever met her. But
I love books that are about capitalizing on mistakes, or what does Bob Ross calls them, happy accidents.
Yes,
right?
yes.
A happy little accident right here.
Yes.
The other thing that I do every time is called Story Sparks. So when you're trying to get people jazzed to be creative, what is a prompt that you use to kind of get their creative juices flowing?
I'll use an example from the Anzu series. I like to ask people, if you could have a superpower, what would it be and why? And because with the Anzu books, his superpower is flowers. He rains happiness or joy instead of destruction. And then you ask the question, why? Why would you have that power? And what can you do to help the world or help one another, or help your community? And it's really fascinating to see, and really heartfelt to hear what students or kids think about, or even adults, and how they I love hearing what they can do with their powers if they had it, these kind of interesting capabilities.
I like that a lot. It's so simple, and what kid doesn't want to think about having a superpower? Right. And you can do so much with it, story wise and creative wise and activity wise. It really is a cool thing to do. So the last thing I want to do today, and because I have another one of my illustrators here, which is just an awesome thing. You guys don't know how cool it is to reconnect, because again, it is there's a lot of distance between us and time
Yeah.
zones and everything else. But I want to talk a little bit about just the power of visual literacy, right? And the resources that you use to, kind of create that visual literacy for yourself. Because there's a difference between reading the pictures and reading the words, right? So when you're thinking about visual literacy, how do you think about that, and how would you explain that idea in a way that educators can understand and talk to their students about it?
Yeah, that's a great question. Before, when we were working on Sloth Went together, I got a lot from your text, and and sometimes it was just very like 2 words, like Sloth Went.
I think it's great that you got so much from my text. This whole story, when I sent it to you, was like 250 words.
That's the beauty of it, right? The beauty of like you can condense a whole story with so little words, but each word mattered. And then you would have some illustration note thoughts, which was really helpful for me as well to kind of picture it as well. So I think trying to, at least whether I'm writing or have a manuscript to look at, I'll go through the text first and figure out what is the story, the baseline of the story. And then when I think about visual, I think about how can I add another layer to that story, right? So if let's say Sloth was going down the tree, right? So he's just going down the tree. So then I think about how does he go down a tree, and how is he feeling as he going down the tree? And as far as movement, is he going slow or is he going fast? And to see him going slow, how do I show the passage of time? But when it's a page, just one page, right? And I can have sloths slowly going down, like 4 panels of sloth going down the tree. But visually, you're like, oh, I see it going down the tree, but how can I make it more interesting? You pick another animal that is just as slow. And then because we all understand how slow snails are or how slow turtles are. So then now you have a comparison. Who is going to win? And you can already kind of tell that this is a very slow process. So it's just kind of like visually thinking about motion and emotion. And also kind of like the expression is another big thing that I try to add for visual learning. So in the classroom, at least even when I do story times at school visits, I do like to ask the students like, what do you think this character is feeling at this very moment? And then on the next page, how are they feeling? How have they changed? Or have they changed? All those kind of questions is like, if you take away the text, can you still understand what is happening in the story? And hopefully the answer is yes, because then it's almost like a narrative storytelling. And then when you add the text on top, you're adding another layer to the story. So I think that's one thing so wonderful picture books is that I feel like it's so valuable for adults as well, because there's just so much, like as an author like yourself, you put so much into the text and there's just so many things to think about.
Yeah, I've talked about this a couple times, but I constantly get comments from editors, can you change this line? And basically what they're saying is we want you to change one word. And that might not be what they're literally saying, but that's what it comes down to. When you have a 250 word story, changing one word can make a very, very big difference. Taking the inchworm and turning it into a butterfly is a very subtle thing, but when you did that, it shows how much time has passed, right? So like that slow little inchworm that passes Sloth on the way down has now gone through the whole pupa stage and is a butterfly, right? And he hasn't even gotten to the bottom of the tree yet, right? So like those little visual cues that a savvy reader can notice will really set the story apart, whether it's from your animation background or just the way that you visualize things. You do a really good job of bringing that visual literacy to people. And thank you for spending a little time talking to us about it. Can you let us know where can people find you and get more information about you? BensonShum.com?
Yeah, BensonShum.com. And on there, I'll have my books. I have the activities all there as well, and the social medias. I'm on Instagram, and all the other ones. But the same tag as at bshum79. So thank you so much for having me.
It was my pleasure. Very much appreciated you joining us today and all of the cool stuff we got to talk about. And please remember, like, comment, follow, share. If you're looking for me, it's adaml.rocks because it's fun. And we'll see you next week.